Hey everyone, so today we will be installing some popular CMS systems, particularly WordPress, Drupal, Ghost, and Grav. And we'll be doing this locally using a technology called Docker. Now, if you're not familiar with Docker, Docker is a virtualization tool, but better yet, it's container based. It's based on this idea that it shares sort of resources between other similar containers, and that way it's much faster to spin up. It doesn't require as much configuration as a normal virtual image might, and it really just it makes things easy. It's very quick to start local development, but I wouldn't recommend using Docker in production. I know some people do, but personally, I think it's just not in a place yet where you should be running some critical web applications off of it. I think it's definitely a great tool to help test software and develop locally and possibly even run development servers off of it. However, it seems a little unstable for complex production apps, but to each their own. So, uh, so traditionally we develop websites locally, and then we test on a development server, and then possibly like a test or a staging server, and then we house the final version on an optimized production server. So we do this to minimize surprise bugs and issues when updating code, and we virtualize the environment to match that of the server it will eventually live on, to the best of our abilities. So because people in the Docker community can write images for different operating systems and distributions and whatnot, it's very easy to spin up a server similar to your production server in most cases. So a lot of other tools that would do this would be, WAMP and MAMP are some simple examples for Windows and Mac. They don't exactly virtualize an environment, but they do run, PHP and Apache and those all of those necessary components to running a PHP CMS whatnot. Vagrant's another good option. We use Vagrant on our team, on our development teams, and of course, Docker kind of takes a kick for being that quick and dirty local environment. It is it is a newer technology, and it's slightly more sophisticated, but can be really efficient when done right. You'll see here I have the Docker homepage up. You can install Docker right from here. I believe now they call it the Community Edition. There's also an Enterprise Edition, but that's a paid version. It has a lot more features and really isn't necessary for what we're doing. So you're going to want to go ahead and click on this Community Edition and click on the store and find your operating system. We are on Ubuntu today. I'm on Linux Mint, which is very similar to Ubuntu. Probably the Debian one probably works too, but yeah. So that was the one that we're going to be running today. I already have it pre-installed, so you can see I have Docker version here, Docker Compose as well. Some Docker engine installs, which are older, won't come with Docker Compose, so you're going to want to make sure you get Docker Compose. We're going to use that for the extent of this video. So yeah, once you get this installed and you can output these in your terminal, you're in a great place, and we can kind of start our project. So we'll come up here to Sublime, and we'll open up a new project. Let's do I'll create a folder here. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Alright, we'll come up here and we will add a folder to the project. DMD CMS. Let's create a folder. We'll call this CMS example. Okay, and this will be our working directory. And let's start a new file. So you can look through the Docker documentation. There's a ton of it out there. Specifically the Docker compose file. A quick Google should give that to us. Compose overview. So you can kind of get started here, and then there will be a reference somewhere, a file reference. We're going to use version 2. This is the most supported right now. They're on to version 3, but not every version has gotten it, and it doesn't exactly work for every install, so we'll stick with version 2 for now. So you can go through and see all of the different options here, but I will nail down the basics for us and sort of explain it as I go. So in order to start up a Docker environment, we are going to need a Docker compose file. So for our first one, let's do WordPress compose.yml. Okay, so in order to start your Docker file, you have to put version at the top. I think actually version 1 files you don't have to do this, but after version 2 or after version 1 you do need to do this. So the concept of Docker is sort of separating your concerns with containers. In this instance, we'll be separating the database and the functional code of WordPress, and we do this by defining certain services. So make sure you follow my indentation here. YML files are not very forgiving when it comes to the indentation, so make sure, or if you're translating tabs to spaces, whatnot, that you're just consistent throughout, otherwise your file might freak out. So yeah, so we'll start a service here, and we'll call this service WDB for WordPress DB. And then we'll specify an image. So if you look up Docker images, there's a ton of them out there. Specifically, we'll look up the MySQL image. No, that won't give it to us. And it'll pop right up on the Docker Hub. So there's plenty of instructions here for how to sort of configure this to your liking. But for now, we'll just take a basic, let's take 5.5 and use this to install WordPress. 5.5 is pretty well supported on most production servers, I would say, nowadays. So this is a fair estimate to go with. And next we'll specify any volumes. So volumes are sort of these persistent data attributes of your containers. So containers are extremely portable, and because of that, they're not exactly, you can't exactly rely on a container to hold data like you would a actual production server or virtualized environment. So you have to specify volumes to persist on your machine and persist inside of a container in order for your information to stay the same. So by specifying a volume here, and let's say we'll name our volume WordPress data, and we'll specify varlib MySQL on the Docker instance. So what this is doing is this will map a volume on our host machine called WordPress data to varlib MySQL, which is where the MySQL data lives in the MySQL image. That way, if we tear down this container, we can spin it right back up and the data will still be there. And now that would only that would not work if we tore down the container completely. It would work if we stopped the container or paused it, but tearing it down completely would try and get rid of all the data together. So we're going to want to specify the restart always property. It just makes our lives easier when we're testing. And we're also going to want to specify environment variables. And environment variables are things like the database name and the database user, password, whatnot, that the MySQL environment will use to start your database. So we can keep this pretty simple. So MySQL root password press MySQL user. Right. Now, you wouldn't use this information in a production server environment, but obviously, just for testing, this will be sufficient. So that's pretty much all we need for our WDB service. So we can move on to the actual PHP application or the WordPress code for our next container, and we'll call that let's just call it WordPress. And here we're going to specify a special property called depends on. And depends on will actually not start WordPress or not start this WordPress service until WDB is started. That's very helpful. So when the WordPress container starts up and it attempts to connect to the database when it first tries to initialize WordPress, it's not going to freak out that when MySQL isn't done initializing. So we'll do depends on WDB, and here we'll specify a WordPress image. If we go over to Docker, we'll see I already have it up. The WordPress repository, they have one here now, and also in the Docker store, which is their new thing they're pushing for CE. We can choose your Docker or your WordPress version here with Apache or Alpine, whatnot. However your configuration is set up. In this instance, we can just use 4.7, and we'll do PHP 5.6, Apache. Let's say most servers you would spin up nowadays could support this. And the important part of our application, as always, is actually viewing it as we test. And in order to do that, we are going to need to view the live PHP code as it runs in the container. So when it runs in the container, Apache, as it would on any normal install, will look at port 80. And so we're going to need to have our machine also point at that port 80. Without specifying this ports option here, Docker would have no idea that we actually want to view any of the ports that are running in the container. Otherwise, they would just be ports that are talking to other containers, and that's perfectly normal for a normal Docker setup. So here we'll specify port 8080 that'll map to port 80 on the WordPress container, and that should give us a preview at localhost 8080. We'll specify restart always, and we'll specify volume here as well. So in this instance, this WordPress data volume, we don't necessarily need to see the files in the WordPress data volume, so there's no file path here. It's just an actual volume name. However, when we're developing WordPress locally or Drupal or any of these CMSs, we want to see the actual code that we're going to work on. So we need to map a volume to our file system. So let's start a new folder in here called www WordPress or WP, and we will map our www.wp folder to what will be var www.html on the WordPress container. So this is where WordPress will be running on the container, and this will map it to www.wp. So notice how we haven't put anything in this folder yet. We don't really need to on first install, but you'll see what happens in a second when we start up this container. So just like the MySQL image, we need to specify environment variables, and in this case it'll be WordPress db host, and that'll be db3306. So this varies from your normal local host or a server name or host name or whatnot. You'll notice, actually this won't be db, this will be WDB. We're actually going to point the WordPress database host at an image and the port. You could also use the links property that Docker Compose has. However, in this case, I'm showing it a different way. But yeah, so it's going to literally be named WDB to the WordPress image, and then we'll see 3306 is the port. And then we'll have the password. And finally, that should kind of wrap up our containerization. We shouldn't need any more services. We'll want to just define the volume we did above, like WordPress data. And we don't need any file system for that, so we can keep it just looking like this. And we are finally done with our compose file. So let's go over here and we'll see we have CMS example. That's our directory, so we'll see WP compose in here. And to start up your first Docker container, you're just going to do docker compose file WP compose YML up. Oh, something's already running. Docker PS. Right, okay, so let's docker compose f down. So that'll get rid of it, and we'll still see this other one's running from that I was testing earlier. So docker remove or stop silly Shannon. Remove. Okay, we'll be all set. All right, so let's start this one up again. And you'll probably install if you haven't had the image before on your machine, but I already have it on my machine, so it was much quicker. Okay, so we'll see in blue here we have MySQL starting, a bunch of garbage that we probably don't care about. As long as it's not erroring out and it's not doing anything crazy, we're good. We'll look for this MySQLD ready for connections. That's what we're looking for. And then Apache down here, this is fine. We're not giving it a host name, so it doesn't know. And as long as it starts this Apache 2D foreground and continues to run, we are in business. So if we look up here, we'll see www WP now has a full WordPress installation in it. This is a unique feature of the WordPress Docker Hub image. If you start up WordPress and you don't have it installed or you don't have the files here, it'll automatically do that for you. So this is awesome. Now we can kind of see plugins, themes, whatnot, and we can edit this WordPress environment right here as it is. And we'll see in WP config it wrote our variables for us: db name WordPress, root user WordPress, and here's the host, just as it is, because it recognizes this as a host name to the database container. So let's make sure this worked. We mapped it to port 8080 and localhost 8080. Boom, WordPress. Get that insecure password. You'll see a bunch of stuff going on here in the background too, making AJAX calls and whatnot. This sort of logs everything happening by Apache, which is very helpful for debugging. And we'll let that install. We'll probably see another request over here. Yep, there you go. Boom. Alright, we are in. And we'll see this should be pretty speedy too, because we have no posts in here. So we have the new theme, the new WordPress theme fully set up, and we can go ahead and start any edits. So I'm not going to go ahead and make a ton of changes to every theme. Just take my word for it that these volumes map and that you can make changes to these files, and it will make a difference over here. And you can use this for local development and then just push up this code without the Docker image or with it. So you'll see that this should work if we create some new posts. Riveting content here on this new blog. And good, we're good to go. This is all working. So we can just Control C out of this, and you'll see it says stopping, and it's not removing it. So we can still spin up this Docker instance again with the same so you'll notice. Oh, there you go, unable to connect. Okay, and boom, this is back up with our test post. So it didn't get rid of our data, and we're good to go. So we'll stop that, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so now that we've kind of seen a basic example with WordPress, we can use this container for our local development. Let's start one for Drupal. I will create a Drupal compose file here, and we can model this right off our WordPress one. Why not? Instead of WordPress data, let's use Drupal data. Oopsies. And we're not going to want to call this WDB. Let's call this DDB. Call this Drupal. And we'll want this to depend on DDB. Actually, we don't need these environment variables at all. We'll create a www.drupal folder. Map it to that. Actually, okay, so the Drupal volumes work a little bit differently. They split out the code a little bit differently than WordPress does. Usually don't ship a Drupal installation with the entire code base. The core libraries are extracted out a little bit, or some common functionality or configuration. So this will be the volume mapping that we'll use for right now. Restart always. We will use Drupal, and I have the Drupal image up here. We'll just use, I don't know, 8.2 Apache, why not? Can't type. Okay, so, and I think the last thing that we are going to do is this privileged attribute right here. It allows the Docker service to run with higher permissions, which will give a lot less errors with this particular Drupal image, which tries to do more than we actually want it to do in this case. So we'll just set it to true. In a production environment, of course, you would not do this, but for development purposes, we want to sort of override everything and be able to control everything. So let's just try and spin this up. So let's do docker compose file. Was it Drupal compose? Oh, okay. So it'll create that. Oh, and we'll see the database is finally ready for connections. And Apache was ready a while ago. Okay, so boom, let's do localhost. And there we go, Drupal shows up. Let's do a standard install. And remember, we set these environment variables over here, MySQL, root password, and whatnot. So let's give that Drupal Drupal, and I think we have to open up advanced to say we actually want it to be the DDB3306. So you remember that configuration from WordPress? How we needed to set the host to WDB. Actually, the port's right there, so we don't need this. But DDB will be sufficient here. So continue. If it doesn't show us any errors, then we should be all set. Okay, so we see another request over here, and now it is moved to the install site. This is going to go ahead and install a bunch of modules for you, similar to WordPress plugins. These are modules for Drupal. A bunch of stuff that they have built in that they think will be helpful to you right when you start. So we'll go ahead and let this download. Okay, so my install has finished here. I just entered the next configuration information to set up the site, like the site name and the admin email on the next page, and we are in our first Drupal instance here. You can see the content, no nodes yet, but whatnot. So this installation should be functional. And yeah, so that's just like WordPress. It was pretty simple to set this up. And Drupal is sort of that special CMS that you really don't need to touch a lot of code to make it work for you. It's mostly module based, and you can even write all of your custom CSS right into the back end of the site. So you could get a lot done without actually touching any code. So we'll go ahead and take this one down, and we'll move on to our next one. And in preparation, I will make a ghost directory here, and let us make a ghost compose YML5. We don't need a database for this one, so we can probably write this out pretty easily. Let's do services ghost, and we'll start with the image, and we ghost. Let's do the latest. I have the ghost one up here. Yeah, they don't have a lot of versions yet. It's relatively new, so that makes it pretty easy. Latest is going to be within a singular version. Ports, the ghost, I believe, runs on 2368. I don't know. Being hipster with their ports, I guess. Who knows? We'll just restart always, and we will set up a date or our normal file volume like WordPress. I believe they keep their files at var_lib_ghost. So so yeah, let's just go ahead and try and spin up this next instance here. See WP up. Let's do ghost. Invalid type volumes. Oh. See, YML. Okay, so npm's going. Created all the database tables, and it's listening. Not on that though. That's listening on the Docker container, and on our host it should be listening on 8080. So let's go ahead and check out. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Okay. Alright, right into Ghost. And I think their admin is Ghost. And I'm probably gonna throw a bunch of errors because don't need any users, take me to the blog. Alright, we're in here. No problem. This is the back end. We'll probably want to go right to, is it general? There are options somewhere. the site URL. There we go. Okay. Much better. Okay, so we don't really need to mess around with Ghost much here, but that was probably the easiest one to set up because it's not exactly dependent on a database. It runs a SQL-Lite database if it doesn't have any mapping to one, which is extremely beneficial in local development, so you can sort of start up and destroy your database whenever you like. You don't need to persist data across multiple systems. You get to play around with it, and you don't really care if you lose data or not. Finally, let's move on to Grav. Now, Grav is interesting in that the Docker image, I tried playing around with it for a while and I couldn't get it to map volumes correctly. I just really couldn't get it to a decent usable state. So I decided to stick it in PHP, in a PHP Docker image, and you'll see here PHP has their own Docker images. Every single version under the sun is here. This is a very basic image to start off with, and it's pretty easy for local development, so we'll just use that instead. And instead of a compose file, I'll actually just create a shell file here. Let's do run grav, and we'll do chmod plus x run grav. Okay. And my command here will be docker run. We'll do version or volume pwd, which is your current absolute directory, and then www.grav. We'll create that right now. Okay. Oh yeah, and by the way, the ghost one, you'll see we didn't have any of this before. This is all added by Ghost. So all of your configuration files and whatnot. So Grav maps to, I believe, apps var in this. Oh, I actually am using the Docker image for Grav. Let's see if I can pull that up. I think it was PHP. It was the one that I was having trouble with. Okay, yeah. So yeah, this one should be fine. But still, I'm going to run it off a shell script because I couldn't get the compose files to work. Okay, and so we'll map port 8080 to, I think they run it off 8080. See here, it's Gary Wiz, Grav. Let's add another command here, another option for create user. And we'll do any user apps var, just like they describe here with the attached storage. So we'll save that, and let's do run grav sh. Oh, it's docker grav, not grav. I wonder if this is actually running. Let's go check. And yeah, we have Grav running. Awesome. What's admin? Sure. Okay, so you'll see this all will work, and we have the user, any user. So you can go ahead and mess around in Grav. So that's the very basic install for all of these. Docker is an extremely powerful tool. As you can see, I just spun up 4 different CMSs, all with different dependencies within a half hour maybe. That is, that's just incredible. Before this, you'd have to either just on your local environment muddy it up with some PHP, Apache, and whatnot, and set up stuff for each site. Or you would have to set up something like VirtualBox or Vagrant or some other virtualization tool. So Docker made this really easy for us. Luckily, we didn't run into any errors too. I know Docker can be be a real hassle if you're doing anything weird or unique. But these basic CMSs, it's just edit files and configuration, and then you're good. So thanks for watching. I will post the follow up to this, the GitHub with the Docker images that I used, and yeah, and we'll take it from there. So thank you.